Good morning, everyone, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is the first time that I'm doing Facebook Live, so if I could just get confirmation that you can see and hear me in the comments section, that would be great, that we're up and running. If anyone is, if anybody's logged on, so if you could just let me know if this is working. Thank you, Carol. Thank you. So if you could just maybe let me know where you're from, and I'm not sure how many people we have at the moment. If someone could let me know whether I should get started or wait a few seconds. So this is the first time I've done this. So if people can just comment that they can hear and see me, and I can get started, I think. Just give people a moment and see what's happening here. I can, Salwa, nice to see you. So, thank you. Thanks, Carol. So, just for my neurotic self, you can see and hear me. Just give me a yes. You can see and hear me. I wish I could see how many people we have on. Yes, okay. Thank you, Susie. Okay, so we are here today to discuss effective parenting principles. Thank you very much. Thank you, for Carol, Deborah from Alberta. Welcome, everybody. Okay. Thank you, Debbie. Lena from Malaysia. Welcome. That's where I went for my honeymoon, KL. And Penang, Seattle. Welcome. Alicia. Great to hear from you as well. Okay, very good. I think we can get started. So we're here to discuss parenting. Leanne, welcome from Alberta. Do we have any people from Australia? Any people from down under? San Diego, California. Yeah. So many of my coaching clients are from the great state of California. I've got to know a lot about your state and the great people there. Madison, Wisconsin. Welcome, Meg. Christchurch. Welcome. I don't want to butcher your name. I'm sorry, but welcome. Dallas, Texas. Great state of Texas. Welcome, Amanda. USA. Okay, so I think let's begin. So I've scheduled this Facebook Live to talk about and discuss parenting, especially in the events that are happening in the world now regarding the COVID crisis, millions of kids being homeschooled. I know with my kids, they've been at home for the best part of a month now. Just have a look here. Adelaide, welcome, Shana. And obviously, for many of us as parents, the distinction between work and home, those lines have become very blurred as we're working from home, our kids are home. So I want to take this as an opportunity to talk about, from Wayala, welcome, Kate. I want to take this as an opportunity to talk about parenting, and to talk about it from the perspective of parenting principles. Now, if you look at the way that I approach topics, Sutherland, God's country, beautiful. I love the national park there. So I'm not going to get too distracted by the comments. I will focus on giving the talk. And there will be time for some Q&A. All I'd ask for the Q&A is that don't reveal personal information. Don't make it very lengthy. If you could put the question in a sentence, I'll give time to question and answer. So I hope we can spend the best part of an hour together. Okay, now it's saying Fate Vitamin Psychology is live. No, stay on this page. Okay. So yes, parenting. So the way that I want to approach today is by looking at parenting principles. And if you're I guess a fan of what I put out there on YouTube or my approach, really the secret to what I do, if you want to say the secret to my success, it's based on the philosophy that you need to understand the principles of something before you can really approach it intelligently, before you can say things about it that make sense and are meaningful. And this is really a philosophy of life, in terms of when you have an understanding of a system and the principles of that system and how it works, then figuring out the details and the nitty-gritty becomes a lot more easier, because you have a unified whole. You have a unified you have the understanding of the principles, which then guide the strategy. So if you have an understanding of health at a systematic or principled level, thank you, Maria, then you can apply those principles for specific situations. Whereas if you just have knowledge of the specifics, so let's say that you have a lot of knowledge on what are some strategies to reduce conflict with kids, and it's just focused on the strategies, but you don't understand the core principles, it will be less effective. Thank you. Okay, so what I would like to do now, if I can get this screen to work, is to go through some core parenting principles with you, and to then go through some strategies based on those principles. So in terms of the principles that we're discussing today around parenting, the first thing we've got to say is that parenting is primarily about parents. It's about us, and not primarily about our kids. If you speak to any child psychologist, childcare worker, therapist, anyone that's involved with kids, who we are working with primarily when there is an issue with a child is the parent. And that does not mean that the parent is to blame, but it leads us to the first principle, that the connection or the relationship you have with your child is the foundation for that child's behavior. And we need to look at their behavior through the lens of the connection and the quality of the connection that you have with your child. Thank you very much. So the first principle I want to outline is that children are hardwired to form an enduring bond or attachment with their parents. And it's through this bond that the child develops their sense of self, their sense of others, and their capacity to regulate their emotions. Now, what does that mean? What it means is that we come into the world as infants, as babies, with a basic, you could call it a neurobehavioral system. We have a nervous system which has a very basic program initially around suckling, around orientating to faces, crying. And if we look at all of these inbuilt reflexes within this basic neurobehavioral system we're born with, they are all geared toward creating a sense of safety and security and a connection with the primary caregiver. And in most cultures, throughout most of time, that has been the mother. Okay, so with mother, or the primary caregiver. So what that does in terms of the connection, it is through that connection with the mother in the first couple of years of life. So mother, primary caregiver, I'll use it interchangeably. But it's through the connection with the mother in those first 2 years of life that build the foundation for the development of the psychological self. And what that basically means is that we're not born with a sense of who we are or a sense of self. Our sense of self develops through the quality and the nature of the connection and bond that we develop with our parent and parents in our early formative years. So I can't really emphasize this point enough, that it's the attachment, the connection with the parent, that is the foundation for the development of the sense of self, of the sense of who we are. And everything in that basic system that we're born with, that basic hardwired package, the neurobehavioral system, is geared toward creating that connection, because it's through that connection that we literally create our sense of who we are. Meaning the infant, the baby, begins to see themselves through the eyes of their mother. What does mother, and again, I'm using that interchangeably with caregiver, what does mother reflect back to me? If mother reflects back to me love and kindness and curiosity and joy, I will internalize that as becoming a part of how I experience myself. To give you an extreme example, if I experience mother as terrifying, or she's shocked, or mother is disassociating because mother has had her own trauma which is unresolved, then the baby and the child begins to internalize that in terms of their sense of self. They'll also start to freeze, feel terrified, feel confused. And in many respects, that is one of the origins of some of the more severe disturbances we see in terms of personality, where the child has experienced the parent as both frightening and frightened. And again, that's on the severe end, where there's unresolved trauma for the parent. And that is where the very role of parent becomes traumatic, because the parent is being triggered by the sounds the infant is making, by needing to bathe the infant if they've had a history of trauma or abuse. Okay, so again, that's more of a severe end, but it illustrates that what's happening for us internally is what we begin to reflect to the child, and then the child internalize that is their sense of self, that is who they are, that is how they begin to feel about themselves. So infants see themselves through our eyes. And if you want a really good example of the importance of connection and seeking safety, and how, thank you, Elizabeth, and how important this is for parenting, look up, if you haven't already, something called the still face experiment on YouTube. And this was pioneered by a developmental psychologist called Edward Tronick, Tronick. where you see a baby go into a state of extreme despair when mother goes into the still phase, when she becomes expressionless after being interactive with the baby and creating that dance of attunement and mirroring. So the first principle is we are hardwired for connection and for attachment. And that is the foundation for everything. That's the ground zero. So when a parent says, I can't get my kid to comply, or, they won't do this, or they're always lashing out at me. And the first thing I want to look at with that parent is, okay, before we look at strategies, what is the quality of the connection? Because everything else emerges from connection. Connection is the soil from which everything else emerges, a sense of trust, agency, cooperation, play, learning. A lot of the kids, not in all cases, some children are born with neurodevelopmental issues, and there are congenital factors that affect the brain and prenatal factors. But for many kids with who are diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, there are clearly psychosocial factors in the home where that kid isn't regulated enough to feel safe and sit down in the classroom and learn. And then they're labeled as a problem child. So connection is the ground zero. Before you go into strategies, you have to ask yourself, what is the nature and quality of the connection that I have with my child? And this is such a basic principle of human relationships. If you don't feel a connection with someone, if you don't feel safe, why would you cooperate with them? Or how can that provide you the fertile ground to form a cooperative relationship? So here we see that in order for children to be able to self-regulate, they need to have experienced what's called co-regulation, where we enter into that dance of regulation with them and help them regulate. And I'll be talking a bit more about that. How do we do that? So the other principle that I want to share with you is that you don't need to be a perfect parent. In fact, when we aim for perfection, Renoir, welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much, Renoir. When we aim for perfection, that actually is maladaptive, because we're human beings and we are imperfect. So what we need is not perfection, but we need what we call repair, meaning when there's a rupture with our child, and ruptures will always occur, tantrums, acting out, not following rules. That's part of being a child. And actually, with very young children, what I share with parents is that if your child misbehaves, think of it as they feel safe enough in your presence to misbehave, rather than being all rigid and following the rules, and then when you're not there, they just relax and do what they want. Is that they're inviting you into, it's a challenge. It's an opportunity for play. It's an opportunity for you to bring out your best and say, how can we deal with this? So we don't need to be perfect as parents, but what we need is the ability to manage and heal ruptures. Because what's very damaging is when there are these ruptures, meaning there's misattunements, we're handing out severe punishments, we're not talking to each other, there is a real sense of disconnection, and that isn't repaired. There's no repair. So the ruptures begin to form this scar tissue. We can become calloused as parents. And I'll talk about the attributions we make about our children and how that can be very harmful when we form a negative global attribution about a child, that they're lazy, that they're selfish, they never listen. When a parent starts speaking like that, I really need to help that parent to develop empathy and compassion for their child, and to see how, and to empathize with them about what have they really been struggling with that's led them to form that very negative global fixed attribution about their child. Because of course, once we form that attribution, that really limits growth. Thank you, Stephanie. Barbara from China, welcome. Colleen, welcome, Colleen. It's good to see you. Yes, so it's about recognizing that when we form those rigid attributions, and we do this as adults, someone does something that we can't readily understand, or maybe they weren't as warm to us and we were warm and friendly, and we tag our amygdala, the threat detector in our brain, tags that person as unsafe. And then unless we're very aware and emotionally mature, it's often hard for us to budge from that initial perception of that person. So we don't need to be perfect as parents, and don't feel bad when ruptures occur. They are opportunities for repair. And actually, what marks a good relationship is when you have a rupture, a misunderstanding, a misattunement, and then it can be repaired and we can restore the harmony in the relationship. That's more powerful than some need to be perfect all the time, or never get upset all the time. That's not realistic. So the next principle, which I've in a way spoken about already, is that the stance or attitude you take toward your child will shape the quality of your relationship with them. What are the attributions you're making? Have you developed rigid beliefs? Are there relationships from your past that you are now imposing unfairly upon your child? Rigid beliefs, links to past people. So watch your language. In terms of watch how you think and speak about your child. It can give you clues whether there are some rigid attributions that you've started to create, which can be incredibly harmful when we start to think, well, they're selfish, they're lazy. Now, of course, children can be humans, kids, adults. Yeah, we can be selfish. We can be lazy. We can be reckless. But the difference is when we make that a global attribution, meaning he or she is always lazy, they're always lying, they never do the right thing, right? This is where we've lost our compassion and empathy for the child. And I would say toward ourselves as well. So the other principle is your own self-state will determine how effective a parent you are, more than will learning specific strategies. So what that means is that understanding yourself, understanding your triggers, understanding and working on regulating yourself, that is the ground zero. That is the foundation. If you don't have that, then the strategies will be less effective or will be ineffective. Because any strategy, this is where we get into maybe a more of a not so much spiritual but an energetic perspective, is that the intention we bring to something determines the outcome. And this is something I never really fully understood when I was young, coming from a Middle Eastern background. And my mum would say, when someone cooks something, if it doesn't turn out well, it could mean that their intention wasn't right. The Arabic word, I think, is nafs or nafas. It's the sense of their heart wasn't really in it. And I think there's some truth to that. If the intention is there, if the intention is that I want to make this work and this makes sense, it's more likely to work. Whereas the intention is, well, here's a strategy. I don't think it's going to work because my child is selfish. The energy we give to that, it already sets it up for failure. Okay, so just to summarize the core principles before we go into some specifics of how to implement the principles. The fundamental nature or the fundamental role of attachment and connection, the quality of the connection. We don't need perfection. We need to be able to effectively manage and ruptures and recreate the equilibrium in the relationship with our children. The attributions we make are very important, the stance or attitude, and learning to regulate ourselves, learning to understand what state we're in. And just a little bit more on that, what that means is that you can develop some insights, almost like an inner barometer or thermometer. Where am I at the moment? Am I in a calm state? Am I in rest, digest, connect? Have I got the melody in my voice? Am I feeling calm? Am I in fight, flight? Am I feeling unsafe? Am I feeling the sense of urgency and obligation? And we need to get all this done. Two different self states, which will massively influence your tone of voice, your approach, how punitive you're going to be, your tolerance for behavior that deviates out of a particular sort of bandwidth. All of this is critical. Okay, so what I want to do now is go through just some more basic, I guess, strategies. And I don't want to take too long on this, but just some things I've written down here to go through around three core areas: creating connection, fostering cooperation, and discipline and dealing with unhelpful behaviors. Now, these strategies apply broadly for children, but they're especially relevant for younger children, right? From the toddler years up until early adolescence, which is where we really want to intervene in those critical windows. Now, that doesn't mean if you have an older child, even if you've got a child in your late teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, these are principles for human beings. But I'm especially focused on younger kids, perhaps that are still in elementary school or primary school. But certainly these principles and strategies work for all children of all ages. But we just have to tweak them a little bit if your child is older. So let's look at creating connection. And again, I will be repeating myself. Let me just get rid of that. I will be repeating myself a little bit because when we're teaching based on principles, we're going to come around to the principle and again because it weaves itself into all of the strategies. So the first step is creating connection. Again, ask yourself, if the question is, well, how can I get my child to do this or that, or why won't they stop doing this? First question is, well, what is the quality of the connection? If I have a deep, stable connection with someone, if I feel safe with this person, if I believe and have experienced that they give me unconditional positive regard, that they're truly interested in me, that they'll give me the benefit of the doubt, that they are fair, well, I'm more likely to comply. I'm more likely to want to comply at a number of levels. For a young child, is because I don't want to disappoint you. But as they get older, the compliance becomes internalized because it's the right thing to do. And because I see you as safe and as fair. And hey, all of us as parents can descend into moments where we become unfair to our children, where we lose our cool. And what I'm saying is, that's okay. Just repair it. Find your way to repair it. It's okay to say sorry. It's okay to say, you know what, mummy, daddy just lost his cool there, and that wasn't cool, was it? That might have been a bit scary for you. How did that feel? And I'm going to work on that. I don't want that to happen. It's okay to do that. That's not a sign of weakness. So creating connection depends on safety. If your child isn't feeling safe, then there's less bandwidth for cooperation, empathy, compassion, sympathy. So when we are feeling safe and grounded, that's when opportunities for connection open up. Think about, for those of you, for example, that have, many clients will say, well, I went to a therapist, but I didn't really get anywhere because I didn't feel safe. And think about what's the difference with someone that you feel safe with to open up. And you might say, oh, geez, I really surprised myself. I didn't think I'd open up so much to this person, but I did. What's the difference there? What's the different dynamic? What's the different energy compared with someone where you feel a little bit more closed off? And this is where, for us as parents, our tone of voice, the melody in our voice is so important. But this isn't something that we can learn as a skill to have a more melodic voice. The melody and the tone of our voice that communicates care, compassion. Hey, I really want to get what just happened there. Tell me what happened there when you just hit your sister, because she's hurt right now. And that's not the sort of behavior we want here, but I need you to help me understand what just happened. And you get down to the child's level and you connect with them because you're curious and you're interested, and you don't just want to mete out a punishment. You really want to understand. So when we're taking a connection-based perspective, the psychology we bring to it is the attitude of curiosity. And this is the foundation for all good relationships, right? Good relationships are marked by playfulness. Partners are playful with one another. They're curious. We can give the benefit of the doubt. We can say, what was going on there? We've had an issue recently with my son, conveniently forgetting to brush his teeth before bed. And, I was just playful about it. So I said, tell me what's going on. And, do you want yucky teeth, black teeth? And how would you feel if your teeth started to, go black and be really unhealthy? And what would that be like for you? It's creating a conversation rather than giving a directive or a command, but it's also communicating that this is something that you expect, but why do you expect it, and what's in it for the child? Now, there will be circumstances, and he has been, there's been a massive improvement and we had to have that conversation about 3 or 4 times. Now, if I had it the first time and I thought, right, I'm the authority, I'm the parent, and he hasn't listened, and then I become more punitive, well, he may comply, but he hasn't learned anything about it. All he's learned is that dad's upset with him and he needs to comply. He didn't internalize that, well, actually, this is something that's important for me in terms of looking after my body, in terms of feeling clean, in terms of socializing with people. If I go to school, we need to brush our teeth, because if we don't brush our teeth and, we have stinky breath, people don't want to talk to us. And that's the tone that I'd encourage you to use. That's the melody, that's the playfulness. Rather than saying, I've said it once, the child is undermining my authority, and now I need to be more punitive. We haven't really helped them to internalize what it is we want them to internalize. Okay, I see I'm at 35 minutes. I can really talk, can't I? So we need to be mindful of our communication style. We need to ask questions, be curious, Be comfortable with silence. Not the sort of silence that that can be used as punishment, where we withdraw love, but the silence of saying, if I'm going to listen, I need to be silent. I need to not jump to a conclusion or to a solution and ask questions. Right? Oh, I see. Or, so what are you trying to say? Or it sounds like this is what's happening. Or could we try this? Right? Child-led play is very important. Following the child's lead in terms of their play rather than imposing too much structure. Just being curious. If your 3 or 4-year-old is drawing a tree and they're coloring the tree pink, let it be a pink tree. It doesn't have to be brown and green. It's a pink tree. Imagination. And we need to reduce our distraction as parents. As a very simple rule, when our children are communicating with us, just put the smartphone away. And if you can't put it away in that moment, right? If you need to send the message or you want to finish reading what you need to read, just give me one moment. And when you've done what you need to do, physically put it down. And you look at your child and say, okay, what did you want to tell me? Right? That's the foundation. If we don't get this right, then we're going to have issues downstream. If the root system isn't strong, then all of the pruning with the leaves and won't be as effective. Thank you, Annie. Okay, so we need to have moments of shared delight with our children. Shared delight, moments where we share happiness, fun, where we make that eye contact, where we smile, where we experience the enjoyment of one another's presence. Okay, fostering cooperation. Now, cooperation, for children to be cooperative, it can't just be about issuing commands all day. And this is what happens when we're stressed as parents. Our parenting becomes marked by issuing a set of commands every day. And how would you feel if you're with someone that's just telling you what to do? That's, if you've ever experienced a boss that micromanages you, that's how it feels. What does it create? Excuse me. It creates resentment. And you might go along and do what is expected of you, but your heart's not in it because you feel that it's unfair, you feel unheard. So in order for our kids to cooperate, we need to help them to foster a sense of agency, that they can do things in the world, that they're effective. And this can be really, really simple. With my daughter, it's, she stirs her chocolate milk. She'll put in the powder and she'll stir it, or she'll press the button when we're making something or turn on the blender. There's a sense of agency. There's a sense of, hey, we're in this together. Come and help me, right? And this comes to this perspective that really what we're doing as parents is that we are coaches. We are coaching our kids. And a good coach looks at his student, his, the players on the field, if it's coaching a sports team, and he holds the unconditional positive regard. He sees their potential and develops trust. And from that trust, that child that has that coach will listen to the coach, even if the coach seems to be, if the coach is going to tell them to do something or do it differently, it will not come across as a criticism or a command because the relationship has been established. So kids need a sense of agency, and this can manifest as help. They can help you make their own breakfast, stir things, pour things. Of course, safety first when we're in the kitchen, but that sense of agency, that if we're always busy, the kid really isn't, our children aren't getting an opportunity to experience that. So let them make choices of how things should be done. Give them a choice. And choices are very powerful because they avoid power struggles. Say, okay, would you like to do your homework now, complete that homework sheet now, and then watch TV for 15 minutes if you watch TV or whatever the activity they want to do? Or do you want to do that now and that at 15 minutes you'll do your homework? And then if they say, I want to watch TV now, then say, okay, so you can watch some TV now for 15 minutes. When it's at 10 minutes, I'll remind you that there's 5 minutes left, okay? Right? This is how we foster cooperation and a sense of agency. Using descriptive praise. Basically, it's when your child does something positive, tell them exactly what they did, rather than saying that was really good or good job. Say, I really love the way that you helped your sister today. And, she couldn't find her pencils and you looked for them and you found her pencil under the bed and you gave it to her. And did you see how happy she was when you did that? It's an opportunity to have a conversation. Give descriptive praise. Great. Okay. So we're still. I'm just having a look here, checking back. Okay. Very good. So we're still on track. Now, I want to quickly say a few things about discipline and discipline. So, discipline, in my mind, is about guidance. It's about setting boundaries that are helpful to the child and that are in the interest of the child, rather than arbitrary rules or rules that just seek to sort of dominate for the purpose of dominating. That won't work. You will either, if you're authoritarian in that respect, you'll either get a kid who is compliant in their elementary years, primary school, and then you will get the shock of your life in their teen years. And you'll think, what happened to my darling little whatever? And it was because what you set up there with authoritarian parenting, rules, is you sow the seeds for rebellion. And there's a very simple principle. Rules without relationship equals rebellion. Rules without relationship equals rebellion. Right? You have to have the connection before you can create or issue a correction. So again, you can say, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I get them to eat? And I say, but the first step is go back to first principles. What is the nature of the connection? What is the state that you're in as you say you need to eat your vegetables or you need to stop hitting your sister? What is the state they're in? What has happened to get you to that point? We need to bring all of those things to bear to make any strategies effective. So we want to also avoid purely logical explanations, especially with younger children, where we can tell them why they can't do something or why we can't have this item, or we just don't have those biscuits in our pantry. I mean, we just don't have them. I wish we did, but we don't. So when we go into purely logical explanations and the child is being dominated by their right brain, their right hemisphere, the verbal linguistic pathway isn't working. And what they need is for us to connect with them with their right hemisphere, their right brain, to say, sweetie, I know you really want to have that treat now, or I know that you want to have a dessert, but it's bedtime now, and I promise let's work something out tomorrow. If I can't get you that, we'll try and get something else. Do a deal, come up with a compromise, empathize with what they're feeling, rather than giving them a lengthy logical explanation because the lengthy logical explanation sets you up for what we call a coercion cycle, because there's a power struggle there. They haven't accepted the explanation, they're still distressed, so you keep repeating it, and then you have to then become punitive, and that creates a rupture where there's a loss of trust. Whereas instead, empathize. Say, yeah, I know how much you want this now, and I know it's hard for you not to have it, but we can't have it now. We don't have it, or it's not the time for it now. It's nighttime, or it's late, or you've had it already. And then do a deal. Come up with a compromise. Ask, could we do something tomorrow? Or could we do something else if there's a substitute that you're happy with as a parent? So we want to avoid power struggles. We want to learn the art of giving choices, doing deals. We want to watch our attributions. If we start to think that the child is lazy, naughty, greedy, angry, a crybaby, that's when our empathy is being lost. And that happens for all of us. I'm not saying that that's bad, but tag it when it's happening, catch it, and say, okay, if I go into this zone or state, I'm going to become much less effective as a parent. And when we're less effective, when we have less to work with, then we become more coercive, more punitive. And if the child isn't responding, then, and there's a power struggle, that can get into dangerous territory where a child can end up getting abused, because the power struggle got to a point where the parent felt completely helpless, but it was set up from the start to go that way because the bandwidth was so narrow. Both parent and child are no longer in attunement, no longer feeling safe. Both feel backed in a corner, and the child can't regulate. They need us to co-regulate. So if we've lost our ability to regulate, so have they. And that can lead them to lash out, to say things that are hurtful, to become more clingy, what we call attachment-rich behaviors. All of these need to be seen through the prism of what's happened in this cycle. Watch out for negative attention. When we give our child or children the most attention, when they're acting up or acting out. And then when they're in flow, in attunement, when they're being helpful, they don't get any descriptive praise, no attention. They might get a boring, monotone voice from us, but when they act up, they get our attention, they get our focus, we make eye contact with them. And although we're giving them negative attention, it's attention nonetheless. And it's what we call attachment-rich behavior, because they're actually getting an attachment to us finally, but it's when they're acting out. So we're reinforcing that if you act out or act up, that's when I'll really give you attention. So with punishment, I just want to address this, and then I'll land and field some questions. My pleasure. My pleasure, Sylvie. I'm not a fan of punishment in terms of punitive punishment like slapping, spanking, nor am I a fan of timeout for young kids. I just haven't seen it work clinically. I haven't seen it work with my kids. What I prefer, and I think because hitting a child, striking a child, getting them to spend 5-10 minutes on their own facing a wall or in a room, leaves that child with emotions that they can't deal with. So when they most need us to help regulate, we're not there. We're saying, it's the sense that there's this global shame. You're bad. Go away. And that's one of the core primal fears of human beings, is to be ostracized, is to be excluded. You're bad. So, but what am I suggesting? That there be no discipline? No, of course not. Because kids need boundaries. And what I prefer is a system of natural consequences where, first of all, you have the attunement, you have the connection, you help them explain to you what just happened, why they think they did that, talk it through, and then help them understand the consequence of their behavior. And that if that keeps happening, then, mommy or daddy will need to do this. That you won't be able to play with those toys anymore if this keeps happening. Or we can't have bath time, or it's going to have to be shorter when you start to do that, right? So a natural consequence isn't a coercive or punitive punishment. It's saying, basically, if you do this, then this happens. But you help them understand why. Like, hey, if you don't brush your teeth will go black. And when you speak, you'll have smelly breath and no one wants to talk to you, right? It's not a punishment. It's explaining the consequence to the child and inviting them in to understand that, and to understand that you're in the position of a coach, a teacher. You love them. You have the unconditional positive regard. And this is most difficult for us as parents when our child has done something that is very triggering. Like, let's say they've lashed out. If you've got a 3 or 4 year old, maybe they've thrown something, it's hit you in the face or hit you in the eye because they're tantruming. And that's when we really need to be aware that that's when we can become very, very punitive. And we need to take a step back and say, okay, I need to identify the state that I'm in, the state that they're in. And it may be in those moments where if you're really dysregulated and you could lash out, then absolutely say, I just need you to sit here for 5 minutes. Okay? I just need you to stay here while you collect yourself, regulate yourself, splash some cold water on your face, think through how you are going to approach this, rather than a reflexive, punitive response, which doesn't teach the child anything. It just teaches them that they're terrified now, they're scared, but they haven't learned the lesson of, okay, what was it that I did that was wrong? Why is it wrong? How did it make the other person feel? What would happen if this keeps happening again? It's an opportunity for a conversation. Okay, so I hope that's been helpful. I can't believe that I've been talking for 50 minutes, but I've gone through most of what I had written down that I want to go through with you. I hope that's been of some help. I'm happy to hang around for 10 more minutes, 10, 15 minutes to answer any questions about the principles that I've discussed. Not so much about lengthy scenarios that this is happening. I don't think that's the Facebook Live medium is conducive to that. But if you have a question regarding what I've been talking about for the past 50 minutes, please ask. And keep it simple, one sentence. About the principles, about the strategies. Thank you, Rachel. And I will say, by the way, that although I haven't really talked about this on YouTube, this is one of the areas that I work with a lot with coaching. I help parents understand their kids, and will I be sharing it on Enneagram? On YouTube. I was just going to say help them with the Enneagram. Let me know how I can share it on YouTube, Fernando. I was just saying that one of the ways I help parents when we do the one-to-one coaching is I really help them understand their personality style and their children's through various systems of personality, including the Enneagram, where we might not be able to say, well, this is definitely your kid's type, but look out for this. This is what might be driving it, because a system like the Enneagram helps you see your core fears and motivations and potentially that of your child. And once you can see why they do what they do, it completely transforms the relationship because it brings about empathy. Whereas if we're just focusing on skills, well, do this, try that, not as effective. You probably just heard my daughter there saying no. Okay. Yes. And she's very strident, turning 4. And so with my daughter, for example, when she's upset, she'll say, I don't love you. Go away. And you have to see that in that moment, she's feeling dysregulated. And again, if you take that personally as a parent, or you triggers huge anxiety for you, like, am I a bad parent, or how could my child say that? No, it's the state that they are in. So we need to restore a sense of playfulness, curiosity. So I might say to her, if she says that, I'd say, what did Baba do wrong? Or tell me why you're upset. Or and it's usually something like, I didn't listen, or she wanted something and she didn't get it immediately, or right. It's the downstairs brain taking over the upstairs, the more cortical structures. Now, my understanding of Facebook Live is when I end the video, there'll still be a recording. Is that correct? So you'll be able to watch it for those people that have just logged on. Okay, let me go through some of the questions. How to navigate technology. You have to set limits on technology. There has to be certain times, what devices you're allowing, for how long, the settings. With my kids, it's we don't use a lot of the Wi-Fi. It's on airplane mode. They're doing a particular thing, or it's there's a particular time. So you have to set the limits. What are you comfortable with? What are you not comfortable with in terms of technology, rather than it being open-ended, and not abruptly taking the technology away if they're immersed in something, but saying something like, you know what, you've been on that for a while. In 5 minutes time, I'd like you to shut that down, and I'll remind you in 5 minutes, okay? Or, we need to do this. Whereas it's not an abrupt transition. We say, you need to turn that off right now. Give them that window. Technology. How can we prevent our kids from being affected by our own energy or state of mind? A great question, Rania. And I think what that requires is, first and foremost, for you to be aware of the state that you're in and the state of mind that you're in. Because once we have the awareness, that's the key. Is that if I'm aware that I'm in an anxious state of mind, or I have a sense of urgency or obligation, or something's pressing, then if I can mentally tag that, that's gonna help me to say, okay, how am I going to approach this, or am I in the right position to discuss this with them? But it's also, if your children are old enough, to say, you know what, mom or dad, I'm not feeling my best today. I'm going to need a little bit of time just on my own. If you need me, I'm going to be here. You can come in. But it's also not forcing yourself to be at a certain level, but to say, hey, this isn't about you. It's about me. I need to have a lay down, or I'm going to be doing a bit of work, but I'm here when you need me. Knock on the door, or come in, or right, so that you can still be that secure base for them. Teens and technology. We have to start early. There is a book I'd recommend for parents called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures, Porn-Proofing Today's Young Kids. And I would recommend that you get that book. And that's more for elementary aged children, elementary school, primary school, 8, 9, 10. And you might think, geez, aren't they too young? It's a big problem now with smartphones, with kids at school. It's completely unregulated. They're accessing all this stuff, and you need to get in first with your child and educate them and give them the awareness of what they can see online and what that means. Because if our children are exposed to these things and have no mental scaffold to understand it, that can be very destructive. So when it comes to teens, accountability, coming up with a deal. If you want to have this smartphone, then part of the deal is that I can, I can have a look at your phone. I'll ask you, right? But I will have a look. We'll have a conversation. If there's issues that arise, we can talk about it. We may. It's basically have an open discussion about it, rather than tiptoeing or spying or saying. Just be very transparent about what you expect. Yes, if you click save video. So it just says and live video. Is there something that I need to click after that? Let me have a look. Thank you, Colleen. Self-awareness, where can I determine my child's personality type? You really need to do that with someone that understands personality. It's not something you can sort of do online or a test. The Enneagram is deeply powerful, but this will be something that maybe I'll look at into the future, but there's a lot of misinformation, and it can actually be more of a hindrance than a help. If as a parent you're looking at it and then you're putting your kid in a box, oh, they're this type, they're that type, you may have mistyped them. There's a lot of nuance. So working with someone that understands personality is going to be helpful rather than reading a book about personality. Yeah, books about parenting. Yes, there are. Daniel Siegel has good books from an attachment and neurobiology-based perspective. Dan Siegel, Siegel, and another author is Laura Markham, Markham, and she's a founder of AHA Parenting, AHA Parenting. Okay, so after I send live, press live, end live video, I can agree to save. Then download it when you sync Facebook to Gallery or Cloud Up YouTube. Okay, so any final comments or questions or reflections? I hope that was helpful. You found that helpful. It's for the parents out there and for the grandparents and even people that are not parents or grandparents, just understanding children and how we can really strengthen our relationships and connections. I hope that was helpful today. And of course, if you found this helpful, once it's ended and I've saved it, share it widely if you think the message is helpful. Just having a look if there's anything else I wanted to. My pleasure. Sibling rivalry, yeah. Again, so this will be the last thing I'll address. I mean, this is a bigger topic, but again, we go back to the principle is to address the sibling rivalry, whatever the issue is, what is the state that I'm in? And with sibling rivalry, what we need to be fair. So one of the things that gets in the way of addressing sibling rivalry is if you have developed a biased view of one child, well, they're always mean, or they're selfish, and the other sibling is correct. And even though you might think or feel that, what you've got to do with sibling rivalry is demonstrate fairness and say, let me understand what's happening for you when your brother does that. Okay, let me understand what's happening for you when your sister does that, and try to come up with a compromise, with a deal. But you can't get to that if one child feels disenfranchised, feels like that they're the bad person, or that their behavior is being viewed through the prism of, well, they're just bad or they're selfish and they need to stop. It doesn't work like that. So that would be my take on it. There is, it's got to occur in the with the realm of compassion and empathy for both. At a minimum, fairness. You say, okay, what happened there? I'm going to give the child the benefit of the doubt. What happened? Even though in your mind the behavior was completely uncalled for, what was driving the behavior? And this is the last thing I'll leave you with is with our children. Yeah, I saw your. I just commented on that, Selby. I can't go into a lot of detail, but I said, you have to address the principles of your self state that you're in, because if you're not in the right self state and there's a lot of rigid attributions you're making about one of the kids' behavior, it won't work, because the child who's not behaving appropriately or has misbehaved will feel targeted, disenfranchised, that you dealt with them unfairly, and they won't cooperate, and they will resent their sibling. It will harm the relationship. I was just going to say one final thing I want to leave you with is asking yourself the question, what does my child need at this moment? And connecting back with your child, with your inner child, looking at a picture of yourself as a child and saying, what did I need? And what do they need? What does he need? What does she need in this moment? Okay. I'm very thankful for everyone that's turned out. I've enjoyed the time. If you've enjoyed the session and you found it helpful, this is really a prelude to what I want to do more and more of into the future, which is do more teaching, online courses where we can go a lot deeper and have a lot more interaction, especially if we use a platform like Zoom. And we're doing things in a more interactive way where I can actually see you and we can address a topic. We can work through an issue as a structured course. I'd really love that for the future. And I'm at the moment restructuring things in terms of how I'm practicing so that I have more time to do that. Enneagram, Enneagram. So like I said, a lot of information about the Enneagram was not fully transmitted, and if you apply it with the wrong mindset, it just becomes another way that you apply a rigid label to your child. So treat it with sensitivity and say, let me be curious about something like the Enneagram and read up on the 9 types and see, where do I think I might be? Where is my child? But I will say with the Enneagram, up to 40% of people mistype for various reasons that I can't get into now. And the potential issue there is once you've mistyped yourself or your child, there's a confirmation bias that occurs where you see the child through that prism. So it's a helpful system, but it needs to be applied with sensitivity and with a level of mastery, because it is a complex system. It looks simple, but it's not, as those who have gone through coaching with me will understand. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to end the live video now, and I will save it so that it can benefit everyone else and upload to YouTube as well. Take care. It's now 11:15 here, Friday, the 17th of April. So for those of you in other continents, in the United States, North America, I'm speaking to you from the future. Okay. Take care. God bless everybody. And I'll catch you next time, God willing. Bye-bye. Thank you. Okay, if you let me get this right. Thank you. If you end this live video now, you'll be able to choose if you want to save or delete it. Okay. Thanks, Irina. Fernanda.